All right, this is Tim Cain on Encumbrance. It's been a while since we reacted to him. Let's dive in. And you hate it, Cutsper. I I have mixed feelings. I mean, if I can jump into and what I feel about Encumbrance before we watch Tim Cain talk about it. What is it from a fundamental level? Encumbrance is a gate to what the player can have in their inventory. So it encourages the player to make frequent trips, usually to a storage unit or like a trader to sell their goods, right? And especially if we're talking about Tim Cain here, he's going to talk about NPCs. So, or I'm sorry, RPGs, not NPCs. So he's basically saying the system of being able to not being able to carry too much and probably go into a trader to trade things off or to sell things or to manage your inventory. And the problem that I have with Encumbrance depends on the items that you have on you, right? Where if the game is giving you more than if the game is giving you a lot of things that you need in a very short amount of time that weigh a lot, that's frustrating, right? There has to be a balance between the amount of gameplay that you do versus the amount of inventory management. I think people playing RPG games generally accept, hey, this is Elder Scrolls 6, I can't just loot every single bandit that I come across. Okay, fair enough, right? But at the same time, I don't want to come across a camp with tons of really good things in it that I all want to take with me, but I can't because taking even 20% of these things over encumbers me. Right? It's like where books weigh, I don't know, 2 kilograms, but I can only carry 50 kilograms on me and my equipment weighs 30. So now I go pick up this book and like this iron ore that weighs 10 kilograms, and now it's like, okay, this is stupid. Like, I need these things in various quantities and measures that you're just punishing me for wanting to take. And I think a lot of that comes down to balance, right? And we're talking about like balance of gameplay versus inventory management and balance of weight of goods. Like, I'm going to be honest, don't make your currency weigh anything. Don't do it. Don't make your like ammunition weighing things is like, well, I guess if you want it hardcore, but then just gamify it, right? Junk, yeah, don't make your junk weigh anything. That's stupid. Or if it does weigh something, don't make it weigh a lot. Gamify it. Gamify the weights. Don't make it realistic because honestly, people don't want realistic weights. It's not fun. Actually, don't do encumber. Well, we'll see what Tim says.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I want to talk about encumbrance.
I missed you, Tim.
I feel like I've talked about encumbrance a lot. But it turns out I talked about it here and there in a bunch of different videos, but I don't actually have a video about encumbrance.
Okay.
And I want to answer a question from Clown Hustler 5815, who asks,
Great name.
would you share your thoughts on carry weight mechanics? I'm thinking something on the conflict between considerations like limiting the player's progression, economy, role-playing versus realism versus forcing the player
There's
to
a
basically
lot of
stop their
considerations.
game and play inventory Tetris, run around to merchants, meticulously compare weight-value ratios, or go throw the item on a loot goblin pile.
Oh, there's a lot of good stuff to unpack in that question. There's so much good. I mean, yes, I agree. I hate the income to weight ratio. That's just, it's like you're putting a point of data in your game because you're accepting that inventory management is not fun. Like, hey, don't filter through these things based on necessity. Filter through them based on an arbitrary value that we've given it, based on its value for the traders, right? I don't like that. Let's just let it get deeper because this is a very good topic, one that is very contentious, one that designers will talk about endlessly, and one that matters based on game, market, difficulty setting. All these can impact what players expect out of a game's inventory management. In some cases, hardcore inventory management is a staple of challenging games or of certain, modded experiences, right? Hey, Anomalies, how's it going? Doing well.
That's a long question. I do have answers. put this all in one video, so then when it comes up in other videos, I can just refer people to this one. First, I will talk about what exactly I mean by encumbrance. I'm talking about games. I'm really talking about RPGs here, mostly.
Called it.
But let's just say I'm talking about RPGs. I'm talking about RPGs where items have weight, and the player character is limited by some total weight of what they can carry. Now, some role playing games also limit the number of items you can carry. There's only so many slots.
Yep.
Or there's a grid and the items are different shapes. Arcanum did that. Arcanum did both. Or you can have games like Diablo where there is no weight, it's only the grid. It's you can carry as many items as you can figure out how to fit on this grid, which means Diablo, you literally were playing Tetris because there could be an item you couldn't pick up, but if you went in and rearranged your items, suddenly you could pick it up. It's why in Arcanum, Diablo was the reason Arcanum has a button to sort your inventory, because it was fairly easy to write an algorithm to sort it by size so that any free spots could be, you'd compact basically inventory and leave a free.
Hot take, I kind of like inventory Tetris. I kind of like it. It's a little puzzle. I see that I have 4 slots open, and I need to fit in a 2x2 shield or something, right? It's kind of fun to figure out how to arrange my items so that I can take that shield with me. Now, do I want to do it too much? No. But I kind of like when I do have to do it. I know I'm in the minority with this, though.
It's the same thing that happens in memory garbage collection. Anyway, I digress.
Tetris is more than weight, better than weight system?
That's what encumbrance is. Items with weight.
I can see that.
There's some total weight that you're compared against, and maybe even there's a total.
Well, yeah, because at least inventory Tetris is a puzzle, right? The weight system is not a puzzle. It is just it is a limit. You cannot take any more things, and if you want to take more things, you need to drop things that you have.
Size to what you can carry as well. Now, once you have a game with encumbrance in it, you can tie attributes and perks and anything else you want into changing those basic encumbrance rules.
I'm not a fan of doing that, by the way.
You could let people carry more weight. You could make some
it's
item
easy, but I'm not
groups way less. Maybe armor weighs 10% less, or maybe it weighs less when you're wearing it, or maybe it doesn't weigh at all when you're wearing it.
I'm more okay with that.
Maybe certain items stack that didn't stack before. Or maybe instead of being unable to walk when you're overburdened, you can walk slowly when you're encumbered. Or maybe instead of saying you can't fast travel when encumbered, you can fast travel when encumbered. So once you have encumbrance, it leads to all these ways you can manipulate those rules around using attributes on the characters. Attributes, I'm talking about attributes in general, attributes, skills, perks on the character to ameliorate different parts of those mechanics that you don't like.
The problem with this, and I get it, a lot of games are designed this way. The thing that I'm not a fan of is that when you first start a game, which is the most important period of giving a good impression for a lot of players, you're giving them the worst experience. You're giving them the perkless experience. And I get it, like perks for carry weight help make the game feel better. But you're starting the player off by making the game feel bad, right? Especially, like I said, if you tie it to, you mentioned like tying it to like strength, right? Based on your strength skill, like we're playing Kingdom Come Deliverance, and that has the amount you can carry is based on your strength level. Well, it feels fine now, but when I started the game, it felt like shit. That wasn't fun, and I had to push through it. Your game should not be unfun to play when you start it out, but then you have that challenge, that timeless design challenge of how do you make the player's progression in the game feel good if you don't start them out feeling a bit weak or incapable, right? I think what I would do if I were making an RPG, let me back it up. One of the things we talk about on this channel a lot is that one of the most important parts of things for like a player and developer relationship is the time. If you disrespect a player's time, you are probably doing one of the worst things you can do as a developer, right? So like really restrictive saving systems. Like, let's say the game will only ever save at the end of an in-game week. Well, there's a lot of shit that can go wrong in your game every single day. And now I have to make it to the end of the week to save? Well, what if I have an emergency or I need to go to sleep and I don't have time to finish it? Any number of things can go wrong. And it's like, what now? I just have to acknowledge that I'm losing this time that I've invested? Well, that's stupid. So one of the worst things you can do is harm a player's feeling of progression in the amount of time that they've done. Which is why I often say, you know what, if you want to save scum, if you want a manual save, go for it. If that's what gives the game its fun, point to point, go for it. If you're somebody who prefers like an Iron Man type playthrough where once you're dead, and you have to start a new save, that's fine as long as your time felt respected. And I think that a lot of encumbrance systems don't respect players' time. You cannot move if you are over encumbered. You cannot fast travel if you're over encumbered. You can't even get on a horse or something. I'm not a fan of that. I'm really not. I'd prefer, okay, just look, you can't move as fast maybe, or you can't jump or something. I don't know, just make it so that there's a bit of extra challenge. Maybe the player can't fast travel, but if they have a horse, they can manually ride there, right? Like the horse can carry some of that weight. Or you have a follower that you can put some things onto, so that at least you have a bit of a buffer. Like, okay, I'm picking up a bit too much, but my follower can carry that. And once we get back to our hideout, our safe house, whatever, our home, we can offload all that into chests and make it easy to offload. Another thing I'm not a fan of is where you can only carry 100 units of weight, let's say, but your armor and your weapons take up 80% of that. Like, well, now I have all this shit that I have to pick up, but picking up 2 weapons and an armor piece that I can sell off is over encumbering me. Well, it's like, what's the choice here? You know, it's just not fun, and I think a lot of that comes down to balance. There's some of it has to do with design, some of it has to do with balance, and it's a beautiful marriage of those two that makes a game feel good when you are over encumbered.
Now, there's a lot of people out there, and I've met them and I've worked with them, who don't want encumbrance at all. They think encumbrance is dumb.
It can be done.
They don't like it. They want it gotten rid of. What it basically means is they just want to be able to pick up anything they want. It goes into their inventory and they don't want to have to deal with it.
If they don't want a similar system, sure.
Like almost everything isn't, I think this is not a way to do it. You can do it.
Yes.
But I think it kicks a lot of problems, or it kicks the can down the road, as a producer I worked with like to say.
Good way to say it.
In other words, you've gotten rid of one, I don't even want to call it a problem, a frustration.
Yeah, it's like if encumbrance is not fun, you're either not implementing it well, it doesn't need to exist in your game, or it's not balanced well. And getting rid of it entirely without replacing it with something else now opens up a lot of problems for game designers down the road, where they're saying, well, now you can pick up everything, so what's the point of going back to your house? What's the point in this case of having storage, of having a player home if you can pick up everything? You know, how do we balance the amount of money that the player is earning hour to hour in our game to make progression of gear feel good, right? Because if I can just go and kill a whole bandit camp, pick up all their armor and weapons, sell them off to the merchants, and get a lot of money, I can just make a shit ton of money that way. And it doesn't really feel like there's a challenge for me to pick up what I think is the most valuable, what is the most useful. I don't think getting rid of encumbrance is the solution. I think that finding a way to replace it, or it depends on the game market, right? Colden Chronicles, our game, I don't intend to have a limit to the number of things you can put in your satchel. I don't, because I don't see it really fitting for a casual market. But if we did, it would be very generous. It would be one where you don't necessarily hit that limit, and your options to get back, go back to your hut, to drop it off, and then get back out there will be very quick, right? Teleport back to where you were, and you're done. Horror games are making it work by enabling you to hold only 2 items at some time. Brings gameplay with that constraint. Weights are ugly. Yeah, but it's balanced around that, right? We're talking about like RPG games, I guess. Where it's if you have all these different groups of items that you want to be picking up. I do kind of prefer a single number limit because it's easier to wrap my head around rather than having to keep arbitrary mindfulness of some weights where it's like, oh, I have a 140 out of 180 encumbrance, so I can still carry 40 more, and then I pick up 2 pieces of armor and I'm at 100 and I'm at 200, right? And it's like, well, okay, so I can only take one of these if anything, and then I have to go back. And now the time it takes for me to get back to a merchant or someplace to drop this off is not fun, right? It's just wasting more of my time because I'm not playing the game here necessarily. I'm not enjoying the gameplay loop in the exciting parts. I'm riding back, putting things into a chest, and then getting back to where I was to do more gameplay. Maybe you're forced to do loot bags that any other player could steal. I mean, that can work too. It's like I said, I don't think encumbrance can't work. I just think it's done very lazily. And I'm not a fan of making the initial gameplay experience worse for a player, especially when it comes to carry weight, just because I want to have perks that allow you to unlock more of it. I don't want me looting things, which is supposed to be the reward, to be a punish. And a weight limit, an encumbrance system, if done poorly, turns what is supposed to be a rewarding part of the gameplay loop into something that is punishing and not enjoyable.
Friction point. Oh, poor player character can't pick up an item that he really wants. Okay, now they picked it up. Now let's look at what you've done. Now look at all the problems you're now going to have to fix in your game. And by the way, I'm not going to tell you how to fix these. This is your issue. If I like having encumbrance in my games, you don't want it, here's some things you're going to have to fix. First of all, item encumbrance no longer exists as a means of item balancing. Like maybe you have armor that has more damage resistance, but it weighs more.
Yes.
It slows down your movement.
It's a trade-off, right? And you've taken away one of the variables for that trade-off. Need to go. My messages don't encumber system. You probably will do it badly. Yeah, it's something that sounds easy, but it needs to be very, very, very well designed and balanced. It's a constant challenge of systems designers, and it's not something you can just add into your game and make feel good. And if you can look at pretty much any RPG game that has ever existed, there is almost always at least one patch that changes the way that things are weighed, because they realize that after player testing, players want to pick up a lot of these things, or players need a lot of these of a certain item to progress, and it was weighing too much. I think at one point, one of the Elder Scrolls games, lockpicks weighed way too much. I know that in some cases, well, actually in Baldur's Gate 3, money weighs. It's not terrible. Like, you can always just shove it to one of your other teammates, right? Like one of your paladins or something, somebody with a lot of strength. But that's something that weighs a lot. But there's also a lot of things in Baldur's Gate 3 that don't weigh that much at all. That is very fair and understandable. What's another good example? I think arrows and ammunition have... Oh man, I don't know if it was another Bethesda game. Yeah, Baldur's Gate has really generous weights. You're right about that. Very, very generous. Which is a good thing, and that's an encumbrance system that works, but it doesn't frustrate people. It's very forgiving. Like you said, generous is the perfect way to say it. Makes sense, since you could literally take 5 barrels of oil. Yeah, I mean, well, that was also kind of the part of the gameplay, right? Like, yes, these barrels are heavy, but I can also use these barrels for a lot of fun. It wasn't, oh, I picked up 1 barrel, now I'm over encumbered. I'm never going to pick one of these up again. I get that I could use them for gameplay, but because I can't strategize with them, I'm never going to pick them up. Yeah, the barrels is a very, very good example.
Maybe it reduces your dodge, or it makes you tumble slower or whatever. maybe you can keep some of those, but if the weight is something you're going to throw away and you're saying, hey, um, I want to be able to carry all these things and I don't care about how much they weigh, then now you're going to make players just carry a lot of that armor, and before they look at a monster and go, what's the best armor I have in my inventory against that particular monster?
That's another really good example. If you can carry everything, you can just have all of your equipment, all of your setups within your inventory. And now, if your game actively encourages players to switch their setups like this, players are going to request that you have a quick switch system, right? Like you can have multiple loadouts like a Core Keeper does right now, and you can switch between those loadouts at any moment's notice. But again, Core Keeper doesn't have an encumbrance system. It just has a typical inventory slot system, which is still sometimes annoying because of the number of items that you have to carry. I think a good example would be Terraria. I think Terraria, when you go into a biome, you are generally looking to loot things from that single biome at a time. You accept that looting only that biome is going to be your kind of focus for the next couple hours. And I don't know if it was intended, I bet it was, because Terraria is beautifully designed, that the number of unique items and blocks you're going to find within that biome during normal gameplay usually won't exceed your inventory limit by that much. So you don't have to sit there and play a bunch of inventory management for blocks that you need. But in addition, you also have a pretty easy early game access to the piggy bank, which is kind of like a buffer, right? Where you can say, okay, I'm now having to put items into my piggy bank. I maybe should get back home. Like, I have some leeway here, but this is my warning.
It also means that leaving items behind no longer exists. That is one of the many ways in doing economy balancing in your game that you manage a source of money.
Yep.
Players can't pick up every item they find. So that source of money is constrained in some way, especially if your game is such that if you leave items behind, when the player comes back, they may not be there anymore.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy to balance that based on like weight. So you can say, that's why the weight to gold ratio exists, right? Is so you can say, well, a gemstone is very light and it's worth a lot. So the player can pick up a lot of these, so we just don't give the player a lot of them. Armor and guns weigh a lot, but they're also pretty costly. And the player can maybe only carry one or two of these at a time, and maybe only wants to carry one or two of these at a time, right? Like for looting one or two of these, in addition to what they already have. So, yeah, I mean, he's 100% right. I mentioned that you balance it based on how much money the player is making, because then you can use that that metric to help balance your progression and price items in shops or determine how much money traders have, for instance.
So you've just constrained a source. What sink, or you've unconstrained a source, what sinks are you going to add to balance that? Because let me tell you, it's already hard enough to balance economies in games. I've got a whole video on that.
Yes, it is.
It's hard enough to balance those. If you start unconstraining sources, the sinks are the hard thing to come up with. It's hard to come up with sinks that players have to encounter.
Yep. I mean, I should watch that video because he's 100% right. Item and gold and like time sinks, whatever. These are really difficult to design well. I mean, people constrain these with grind, right? But grind is just gameplay that is often seen on a negative light. And if you aren't having fun performing that loop to progress or to sink your gold into, for instance, then you call that a grind. But if you enjoy it, you don't usually call it a grind, or you're less likely to use that kind of term for it because it gives that negative connotation. But a game with a really fun gameplay loop where you're leveling up and progressing, I mean, that's a grind for progression, is it not? And yet it's fun, so you continue to do it and you don't kind of consider it like that. Doing missions in Deep Rock Galactic, you're grinding up levels for your character. But because that is the gameplay and it's enjoyable and has a lot of variety, you don't see it like that. Take MMO games, like old school RuneScape. Love playing old school, but I'll tell you what, that game has a lot of grinds. It does. 1 out of 3,000 drops from bosses that you have to take 2 minutes to kill. Let's do the math on that. It's not great.
I mean, they don't like doing armor repair or weapon repair. They don't like fees for entering cities or using roads or paying guards or bribing, and you can't always make them do that anyway. So sinks are hard to come up with, and you just unconstrained a source.
Yeah, and the difficulty with that, one way I could see of solving that, if you were like, okay, the player can pick up any weapons or armor that they want. You could go the route, and some games do this. I fucking hate this, by the way. But when you kill like a bandit, they don't drop the items that they're wearing. It's just randomized loot. And that's easy to control if you have a wait list. If you have a system that doesn't constrain weight. But I really hate that because, when I get excited when I see like an enemy holding something or wearing something that's like, oh, I can see that's better than what I have. I'm wearing leather armor. He has steel plate armor. I want that. And then you kill him and he doesn't drop it. And then you later find steel plate on some, like, I don't know, wolf that you kill, right? Because it's randomized loot. That's not fun, and there's no strategy there. Especially if it's like, okay, well, this character is clearly stronger than me. But if I can find a way to kill him, I get his good armor and weapons. That's more enjoyable to me. That's a reward for my observing.
I think the most obvious thing here is inventory UI. You just made it potentially possible for the player to have an infinite number of items. How are you going to make your inventory UI not be a new friction point? In Pillars of Eternity, we added a stash, and a stash was when you picked up more than fit into your inventory, it went into the stash, and the stash was an infinite stack of items, but you could only take the item off the top stack, which in itself was kind of a new friction point, but it meant you could pick up everything you wanted. And then when you got back to town, you could pull things out of the stash.
I've played only a little bit of Pillars. That's a game that I was starting to go through for my first time at home. How do I feel about that system? I get it. But then you're almost just delaying the friction point, right? Because you can only take it from the top stash, which means you can pick up whatever you want, but you're inevitably going to have to go back to town, and if you want the thing that's middle of the stash or end of the stash, God forbid, you will first have to pick up all the other stuff from the top and either drop it, destroy it, break it into components. I don't know if Pillars of Eternity has that. Probably just drop it or sell it or something, right? To get to the thing you need. So you're not really fixing the problem, in my opinion, with that system. You're just delaying the same result, which is you're going to have to sort through a bunch of shit you don't want and probably shouldn't have picked up to get to the thing that you needed in the first place or wanted.
You can also try to handle it with stacking, but now you have tons of items stacked on each other, and you have to deal with issues about stacking. Like if I have
different durabilities or something,
an item that has a certain number of charges on it, it can probably only stack with things with light charges. This happens in Fallout 4 with the fusion cores.
It happens in Minecraft too.
They have 100 charges on it. As soon as you use one, they don't stack anymore.
Yep.
Pretty soon you end up with a whole mess of fusion cores in your inventory because they all have different charges on them. You can also try to do it with panes, like your inventory just says panes and pages, so you can just add extra pages of stuff. Well, guess what? You've just made
filtering and sorting. That's gonna be hell.
A ton of inventory panels that the player will have to search through when they're looking for that one item they want.
Yep. Next page.
Well, people have always complained about inventory clutter in RPGs. You just made that problem a lot worse, and how are you going to solve it?
Because we talked about junk earlier, and I want to voice that I'm not the biggest fan of junk that you take to a trader and sell. I think we were playing Star Wars Outlaws, and I was talking about that too. I don't like that because you're adding items into the game that have no purpose, and sometimes they sound cool, right? That's great. You have this, I don't know, this corrupted data pad. and it's just junk, and you're meant to sell it to a trader for like 2 space bucks or whatever. Why couldn't you have just put 2 space bucks extra in some chest that I loot? You know, you're almost like diluting the loot, right? Where instead of 5 instances of really significant, strong bits of progression with your loot system, now you're having 100 instances of just tiny bit. 2 here, 3 there, 4 there, 2 here. And I'm not a fan of that. Fallout is the only game that did junk semi well. Yeah, and that's because junk wasn't. It wasn't junk necessarily. It was salvageable junk, right? It was salvage. So they called it junk, and instead of you just being able to throw it away or do whatever the fuck with it, you broke it down to upgrade your equipment. So it wasn't that you were. If we think about it in more like systems terms, you go around to different locations and you loot money for trading and salvage for progression with your weapons and armor. I mean, that's generally it. Or, new equipment that you can use. And that works. It's really just like. Actually, let's break it down. You have, in Fallout, when you go to a place, you loot equipment to better yourself, consumables to augment yourself, junk to upgrade yourself, and money as a general form of currency for trading for things that you want that maybe you didn't find from the randomized loot system. And it works. It's simple and it works. Things you want to add lots of stuff to the game to be on shelves and such for the ambience, yep. But if it's useless, why even make it to be able to be picked up? I agree with that. And you're 100% right about Fallout did that and found a way to incorporate it into the gameplay. And it works beautifully. But in other games, you're right. It's like you either just pick up this junk thing that you're never going to pick up again and has no use. So now you have extra physics objects in the level sometimes that, or in the scene, that players are never going to interact with once they realize that they have no use for this thing. Or it's just a bunch of props. And honestly, I think that just making it a bunch of props is probably easier for players to accept than if they pick it up and realize that it has no use. And I'm not a fan of that. It's like, okay, well, this, I don't know, this like furniture decoration item that I can pick up and I can sell for like 10. It says it's worth 10 gold, but I can only sell it to a vendor for like 2. Well, okay, what's the point? I can't do anything with it. It's just clutter. It's literally just clutter. And if I accidentally pick it up, God forbid I accidentally pick up a bowl in Skyrim when I'm trying to loot the ingredients out of it, now I have this thing weighing me down that I'm never going to use for any purpose.
Because remember, this all stems from you just going, I want Encumbrance gone. Also, you've now incentivized player hoarding. I have a whole video about that. Go watch that video. Look at what all the problems are. You've just made player hoarding a lot worse. I'm not even done yet with the problems you've introduced to. Are all the merchants that exist in the game going to have infinite gold?
Yep. It's like, okay, so if merchants now have infinite gold, that contributes even further to the problem of the player's progression in terms of money. If they don't, now the player can pick up whatever the fuck they want, stack up their inventory to thousands of weight value, theoretically in this case, and only be able to sell off 2% of that to a merchant. Then they have to wait 24 hours or find another merchant. It's bad. It's not fun. It's not fun. It's just time wasting. It's not immersive. It's not enjoyable. It's not balanced. It's time wasting.
Because if they don't, the player's still going to have to make multiple trips to different merchants to try to sell off all the stuff they're carrying.
Yep.
And if they have to make multiple trips, in between trips, if they're going on more adventures, they're just getting more stuff. You may create this environment where items are entering into your economy faster than they can possibly get removed. So the player's inventory just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Oh, but they do have infinite gold? Well, now you're going to have that problem where gold becomes basically worthless.
Yep.
Because it's infinite. It's a whole different problem on player economy. I'm curious how you're going to fix this because I've never seen a game fix this. But you may be super smart and you may work this out.
There are a lot of cases where removing encumbrance and making gold easy to obtain is it's done in casual games where that's not supposed to be a core focus of the of your progression and your strategy is managing your gold and inventory. It exists there merely as I don't know, like a facade. Well, it's a game that's in a fantasy universe, so we have gold and you can buy things with it. And you know it's like if this you allow this much shit into the economy, but you find another way to limit the player to only be able to have this much at any given time, fine, it can work, right? Like you have easy access to gold, but you can only buy a few things from a merchant at a time in some way. It's a way to solve it. Like it's not a good way, but there are ways to solve it. The way to kind of solve it is to make the thing that holds your gold limited. Oh yeah, the bigger wallets. I remember that now. I wasn't a fan of that. I remember that, but I wasn't a fan. I mean, another thing you can do is just limit what the player encounters, right? So if the player can pick up anything, but they don't really have anything spawning around at a significant rate, I mean, okay, I could see that working. Like it's just how where do you put the buffer in? And every economy in a game needs some sort of buffer or limit to prevent the player from progressing further than the game designer wants them to progress at a certain point. And that can be done through any manner, right? So if we look at Kingdom Come Deliverance, all the best shit is locked behind really good chests. And so you can start off the game by pickpocketing and lockpicking and all that stuff, and you'll make some good money. But you can't really get the best stuff until you do it a lot and you make that part of your game's of your build. Someone's gonna find a way to break glitch it no matter what you do. Yeah, they will. They will. I agree with Tim. I don't think getting rid of encumbrance is in any way the best solution. There are much better solutions to fix encumbrance in your game if it is a problem than getting rid of it.
Oh wait, there's another thing I wanted to mention. Remember all those attribute and skills and perks that I said could interact with carry weight mechanics and adjust encumbrance and different rules for encumbrance? You just got rid of all that. So what new ones are you going to invent, or are you just going to have less? Either way, you've got a new problem. You've got to invent a whole bunch of new things and new perks and new effects that attributes have, or you're going to have to accept the fact that strength doesn't do as much and there just aren't as many perks for people to pick from anymore. Okay, you may accept that. One last thing. You just threw realism right out the window. This is not realistic. Is that a pillar in your game?
Yeah.
Is it part of your game flavor?
You need to ask
If
that. Yep.
so, you just caused a new problem. It's almost an existential problem. You just contradicted a pillar, or you just threw something in that's the wrong flavor for your game. Now, don't make a mistake. I'm not realism. I have a whole fun versus realism video, and I fall down firmly in the fun camp.
It just depends on the
So
game.
this isn't something that you find in my game, but it may be in yours. So if you want no encumbrance, but you want your game to seem very realistic, that's gonna cause a tension in your game.
I mean, it's not everything that's realistic is good, and not everything that's unrealistic will break the immersion in your game. Take Red Dead Redemption 2, for instance. Very immersive. It's a bit slower paced of a game, you know, like Kingdom Come Deliverance. It's an immersive simulator and action game. And what is the hunting system like? Well, you use the right ammunition to get the best pelts, but you also have to shoot in the right place. The rating of your pelt is gamified, right? But it's based on your skill and your knowledge of what to use to properly kill that animal. So it's not incredibly accurate, no. But it's immersive in a way that feels fun to play. The hunting in Red Dead 2 is a fun gameplay loop, and finding the best pelts, hunting the animals, and being able to get the best gear from it is very satisfying.
it doesn't make sense. So, bottom line, because I've talked for over, well, just hit 11 minutes.
I've talked
Should
longer,
you have
Tim.
encumbrance in your game or not? It's your choice. Especially if you're the design director, decide. But understand what your choice entails and all the issues you've just created.
Yep.
Because you're going to have to fix them. Like I said, I don't like it when people, especially leads and directors and people above them, go, I demand you do this and then fix any problems it causes because I'm too busy. This is your problem. You introduced all the issues I just mentioned. You will have to fix all of them or accept them and say, I don't think they're a big deal. But that's everything I can think about on encumbrance. And I hope that helps if you're designing a role-playing game and you're trying to decide what to do with items.
Fantastic video and a fantastic topic. I mean, that's just one of those topics that designers have argued about for ages, and it really just it can't always be solved in some perfect, beautiful way. And every game now, after we've solved the problem, is just going to be magically perfect. It really depends. Sometimes encumbrance works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the implementation of one encumbrance system works in that game, other times it doesn't. And you have to determine what is best for your game. If in Colden Chronicles, if I don't want there to be a limit on the number of herbs you can pick up on an excursion, I need to find some other way to gate the player's progression. I need to determine, is this right for this game? Or should we put a limit? Should you be able to upgrade your satchel to hold more ingredients? Maybe we only limit ingredient types, but we allow you to pick up an infinite stack of those ingredients when you're out in the wild. You know, how do we balance this? What feels good for the player and what feels good for the gameplay? I think KCD does it well, but you can also just move stuff to your horse. The horse helps. The problem with KCD is that it doesn't give you a horse when you start the game. That's the only issue I have with the encumbrance, is that if I'm starting the game, my strength level is shit. I can't pick up shit. And it's at the start of the game when I need all these things to start my progression, right? I need to sell a few things, get some money so that I can get what I need. And that's inevitably going to require me to pick up some heavier things to then go sell it off. And without the horse, I'm just kind of left in the gutter. And you don't get the horse canonically quite late into the gameplay. Many, many hours. Past when you would have been enticed by the open world to go and explore it. But hey, another great video by Tim. I'm going to paste the link in chat, and if you guys want to like it, and oh my god, there's a spider that just fell right next to me. It kind of scared me. It was like it's right in my peripheral, right 90 degrees from me. I just see this dark thing fall, and I'm like, ugh. He's just a little spooter though. I could show him in chat. You guys want to see the spider? Let me see if I can get him. Where's he hanging? I don't know if you can see him. I'm holding him. He's a cute little boy. Oh, he's climbing up to me now. Yeah. I don't know what he's up to. I'll go put him somewhere safe. Kill the bugs that get in. Not as kind to insects as you are, but you're raising a farm. Yeah, I like, oops, that's the wrong scene. I like spiders a lot. Big fan. Alright, here's the link if you guys want. Give this a like and subscribe. Tim just makes excellent videos. Huge source of knowledge, and I love him on this channel. I hope, if he ever learns that we're doing this, I hope he doesn't mind that we're reacting. But if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching that one. We'll do one more after this, I think. And then I gotta get going home. We'll see you, YouTube.